So good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Mohamed. I'm the founder and CEO of Urban Intelligence. I appreciate some of the people on our guest list are probably quite friendly to us, and there will be others that don't necessarily know who we are and what we do. So just to maybe set a little bit of context, so we are a property technology business that specializes in plan tech. And so what we're doing and what we're really focused in is basically taking a lot of traditional planning processes and trying to think of innovative new ways where they can be made either more efficient or more effective through the use of data science and technology. So on the call today, I've also got a few of my colleagues. So we've got Janos Hoffman, who is our chief data scientist. We've also got Joe, who's a director, and Josh, who's a project consultant. We're also very, very lucky to have Louisa Facchino-Stack from the London Borough of Hounslow, who's going to provide a bit more context into the nature of the problem and the work that we've been doing with them in using some of the digital techniques that we're talking about. Cool. Josh, do you want to take us to the next slide? So, Joe, maybe do you just want to give a bit of background in terms of the type of work we do?
Yeah, thanks very much, Dan. So yeah, my name's Joe Welch. I'm a director at Urban Intelligence. I'm a chartered surveyor and chartered town planner, and I've got a background in consultancy. I think it's fair to say that whilst Urban Intelligence are experts in data analytics and geospatial science, we're all planners. Even Janos with his PhD is a converted planner, and don't let him tell you otherwise. But we are a company that's basically obsessed with making the world of planning better for all. And we offer a range of services more generally in real estate. And you can see some of the clients that we work with here on the slide. So there is a mixture of local authorities and central government and also private sector clients. And you're more than welcome to check out our website for the range of services that we offer. But the running theme is always geospatial science, data analytics, and it's all in the world of real estate. So what we're going to run through today in more detail is what we call the PlaceMaker solution, which is something that we've built for the London Borough of Hounslow, and it's something that's also being rolled into Birmingham City Council as we speak as part of the MHCLG Pathfinders programme. So Dan and Louisa will do a bit more and come on to that in a few moments' time. But the main key takeaway for what this solution provides in our view is just a huge saving on time. And whilst that's only the beginning of what we see as maybe the business case to the local authorities themselves, what we think as planners and experts in this field is this will lead to a really interesting and exciting period of actually asking even more intelligent and advanced questions, because we're no longer as planners going to be so fixated on working out the answers, because what you'll see from the demo shortly is that we can model effectively policy changes in real time, so we can really get really stuck into creating better places as far as we see it. So this is a solution that's been designed by planners for planners, and even though it was conceived as something that would be there to help with site appraisals, we're already seeing great feedback from other colleagues in the local authorities that think it could be really useful for things like asset rationalisation, land disposal programmes, housing grant applications, and just general housing monitoring, and obviously modern methods of construction as well. So I think without further ado, I'll pass back to Dan, who's going to begin the slides. And the one thing I'll finish with is, if you could please just ask any questions as they come up, just put them in the chat, and we will pick them all up at the end, because we want to have this as a very sort of ideally heavy Q&A session, and we'll hopefully have lots of time to respond to all your questions as you list them. So thank you, Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Joe. So yeah, just a bit of housekeeping as well. So we are recording this session, and we will be planning to share the recording with all attendees and all people who registered after the session. As Joe mentioned, yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get through to them, and hopefully it can all be a bit more interactive towards the end with the Q&A session. But yeah, so just to really get started, this illustration that was basically put together by Johanna, one of our colleagues, is a really good example of why we do a lot of the things that we do at Urban Intelligence. And this pretty much describes the traditional process that local authorities in particular might go through in terms of identifying the sites with potential in the preparation of the evidence base for their emerging local plans. So I'm sure many of you on the call will know that local plan making is an extremely time-consuming process, and it takes on average between 5 and 7 years to adopt a new plan. And just going through the stages in this journey of this poor man who starts as a young man and ends up as a very old man at the end of the plan process with a beard. This is a very good illustration of where some of those years go in terms of the process of collecting all of the information that's required about sites from various different documents, either prepared by the council officers or submissions from members of the public. And what we're trying to do is to really speed that process up by making it a lot more digital and data driven by default. So if you could maybe just switch to the next slide, Josh. So just to explain the nature of the work and how we work. So Urban Intelligence as a team, as Joe mentioned, we've got a lot of expertise in using data science and geospatial analysis in particular for solving planning and property development related problems. So just as a quick example, in this case, we worked with Louisa at Hounslow, and at the start of the process, we tried to understand what challenges that they were facing, and Louisa, I'm sure, will tell you a little bit more about those in just a second. But we actually took all of the things that Louisa and her colleagues were trying to solve, and we basically came up with a methodology for assessing sites on a very wide scale using geospatial analysis and using quite innovative approaches, which are really quite unique and novel. So, but by the end of the process, after all of the analysis being undertaken, all of our sites are provided in a scores organized format. And the demo itself will kind of reveal how that kind of works. But maybe without further ado, Louisa, are you happy to maybe give a bit more of an introduction to the Hounslow context and maybe the experience of the project from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Dan said, I'm Louisa. I'm a project officer working in the spatial planning team at Hounslow, and I was placed at Hounslow through the public practice programme to work with the team on a number of projects, including this one. So just in terms of the Hounslow context, we're a very large borough in the west of London. We have Chiswick in our east and Heathrow Airport to our west. And like all areas in London and throughout the rest of the country, we have exceptionally high housing targets to deliver over the next 10 years. We need to deliver almost 18,000 homes, of which almost 3,000 need to be on small sites of less than 0.25 hectares, as specified by the London Plan. And what we normally do is we find sites through the call for sites process and through the HELA/SLA process, so finding sites that are suitable and available and achievable. But we need to make sure that we can continue to deliver sites into the future and find sites for our future local plans, our brownfield land register, and have a better understanding of our windfall supply of homes. So next slide, please, Josh. So as this project comes as part of a suite of projects that we're undertaking concurrently as a spatial planning team. So we have our character and design code study being undertaken by Eliza Morrison, which we are nearing completion on. And we also have a parametric site capacity calculator being undertaken by ViewCity, which will be absolutely incredible. It's going to sort of estimate site capacity automatically and just make the whole process much easier for planners in terms of master planning. So we've linked all the projects together. So height recommendations from our design codes feed into both the database and the parametric design tool, and then the database feeds into the design tool and vice versa. And we can tell you about that at a later date. So next slide, please. Onto the database in a little bit more detail. So our spatial planning team applied for some funding from the GLA to create a database of sites that would help us find and identify sites for future local plans. And then over the past few months, we've used that funding to work with the brilliant Urban Intelligence to co-create the sites database, which I'll give you a bit of a demo of in a moment. So we put out an open tender for the work and received a variety of methodologies for submissions, ranging from a very manual approach of searching the borough for sites, and then having that in sort of an Excel spreadsheet, to the quasi AI approach of urban intelligence, which kind of uses data we'd normally use in a SHLA to find and assess sites automatically. Next slide, Josh. So I'll just talk a little bit about the methodology that we use to identify the sites. So what we've done is we've digitalized that HLR process. So we've, in the kind of image on the left, we have designated certain features as clips, which are kind of absolute constraints to development and what we treat as undevelopable land. So that's things like greenbelt, metropolitan open land, ancient woodland, very severe flood zones, and sort of the BAA safety zone, which is to do with the airport. And then in the image in the middle, we've also designated other features with a balance score. So recognizing that they're a constraint or a limiting factor to development, but can be overcome. So things like conservation areas and some of the flood zones, air quality focus areas, things like that. So each one of those is awarded a certain amount of points pertaining to how much it restricts development, and the kind of lower the score on the site, the more unsuitable it is. And then on the image on the right, we have manual layers. So those are things that officers should kind of keep in mind when assessing the site. So things like the Thames policy area, which has implications on how tall you can build, and archaeological priority areas, which impact on viability. So I'm just going to share my screen and I'm going to give you a little quick demo of the database. Just to check that you can see my screen there.
Yep.
Okay, fab. Okay, so this is the screen that loads as you come into the database. And what you can do is you can filter the results by lots of different things like site area, estimated capacity. You could filter it on ownership, on whether a site is suitable or not. But what I've done at the moment is I've applied a tag filter, which is the kind of site I put together earlier that I want to assess in more detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll into a site that I found here and ask the database to give me more site details about it. So as you can see here, you've kind of got a map of the site at the top, and you've got this sort of link into Google Maps here where you can put your little man down and see the site from Google. And it's quite useful because it means you don't have to keep swapping tabs all the time here. So quite time saving. And on this first screen, you've got an overview of all the kind of data and analysis that we've done on the site. So how big it is and its estimated capacity and whether it's suitable for development and when it could come forward for development as well. So what you do is you can kind of go to this first tab here, which tells you about the ownership details of the site. So often councils' kind of ownership data is slightly erratic. So as a part of this project, we've really rationalised the data and put it all into this. So you can see exactly what the local authority owns and where. So as you can see here, the Hounslow own 100% of this site. And you can also see that there's a leasehold on the site. And if you wanted to kind of look at land assembly opportunities, you can also see whether you as a council own any other land around it as well. And then moving on to the suitability assessment, which is what I talked about earlier in terms of the methodology, we can see that the site here is suitable and there's no exclusion layers, so nothing stopping development on this site. But it's scored a score of 70 out of 100, so taken 30 points off because it is in a flood zone 3A for surface water. And if you want to look exactly where that flood zone is, you can click this button here, which shows you exactly where the flood zone falls on that site. And this tab here assesses the site's capacity for development. So it takes in recommendations from our tall building study, but you can sort of set these otherwise. You don't have to have that tall buildings recommendation. So we've kind of recommended a 5-storey development on this site with a potential plot coverage of 60, which is giving us 45 units and estimated sort of non-resi capacity of 900 square metres, which could put sort of a community use or a town centre use or something like that. But what you can do is if you don't agree with this kind of thing, you could lower the height, say to 3 stories here, and it will change your estimated capacity in line with that. And the same thing for plot coverage as well. And as you can see, the kind of computer is calculating out in the background and changing the units as we go. And moving on to this tab here, which is In the halal terms, it's the achievability of a site, so whether the site actually has a good viability position. So for this, we've tried to follow the London Plan methodology for viable sites. So using existing use value plus, which takes the kind of benchmark land values from our local plan and then applies a sort of 20% profit, which is kind of the standard. So I won't go into too much detail here, but you can see that the site is coming out as viable, which is great. And then on this tab here, we have the availability part of the SLA. So if you can imagine that this site was owned by a private developer, you might want to sort of issue this form to them and ask them sort of a few things about the site. So getting their sort of details from the land registry, and then sort of asking them about when they want the site to come forward, whether there's sort of any abnormal development costs, what they want to do with the site, and kind of what are their motivations for submitting it. And then you can sort of update this details as and when. So in a couple of years down the line, if some of their contact details have changed, you can record that in here. The other thing I want to show you, which is really useful, is if you want to just kind of assess a portion of the site, you can use this brilliant tool here, which clips to the polygons, to the site boundaries, and you can draw a portion of the site that you want to do an assessment of and save that. I've done it earlier. So here it is, view site details, and you can see all the details of this portion of the site. So you can see that leasehold coming up there and the freehold by Hounslow, and then it will assess the capacity completely on this portion of the site. So as you can see, just 5 units here. And then the other thing that we have developed is this public web map here. So as a borough, we are accountable to our residents. And residents often want to know if we're delivering on our pledges or not. We pledge to deliver so many homes a year, and residents want to see, if they're coming forward and where they're coming forward. So what we can do is, if we wanted to make this site public, we can toggle this button here, which makes it visible on this web map. So if I just do a quick refresh, you can see here that this site has popped up. And click on it here, and you can see all the kind of key details that people might want to know, such as how many units are coming forward on that site. And the kind of other really useful thing is being able to add files to the portal. So you can add a screenshot here of the site, which is the Sea Cadets bit at the back. So you can see that as an officer, you've got it in here. And then if you reload on the public web map again, we can see, no, we can't. Never mind. That image would normally come up.
You just need to refresh it, Louisa.
I just need to refresh, okay. Not today, but it normally works. Oh. You'll have to take my word for it today. So yeah, that is everything I wanted to show you. So I'll hand over back to the team.
Cool. Thank you very much, Louisa. Josh, do you maybe want to go into a bit more depth, just very quickly, on some of the other bits that we've skimmed over? So, for example, the Core for Sites exercise. So yeah. I noticed that one of the questions was around where all of these sites come from. A lot of these sites, the kind of base data set that we use to identify land titles and interests is the cadastral layer, which comes from the National Polygon Service of Land Registry. But what we've also got, we're very lucky working with local authorities, they've got a lot of their own data. So as Louisa mentioned, we've been using their assets data to understand where the council's own assets might lie around the borough. We've also got previous SLA sites that have been submitted, but we've got site allocations and a range of other non-registered land parcels that were considered as part of the search. But one of the other key features that we've developed is this Core for Sites form, which enables the officers to collect So it enables members of the public to submit sites, and all of the information that they provide via a form actually gets injected into that availability tab, which Louisa just showed in terms of all of their contact details, what their proposals are for the site. And that just gives officers a live, intelligent, up-to-date database of who's interested in different parcels of land around the borough. So go on, we don't need to go into too much detail, but it's very much that is one of the sources of the data that is provided in terms of the analysis itself. So Josh, maybe, do you want to maybe touch on a couple of the other features?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do. So just to demonstrate a couple of different things in terms of how the sites are visually presented. So Louisa touched on the sort of clip constraints that we're using, so areas that get sort of removed from developable area of the whole site. So what you can kind of see here is this entire site is one land registry parcel. I'm in this example, and the whole the outline is the full land registry parcel. But what you're able to do is basically use this clipping function to basically show what the developable area is within that site. So this site, for example, if I go into the details, and then if I go through to the suitability, you're able to see what the exclusions are that are present on that site. So, for example, in this case, we're using sites of importance for nature conservation, so sinks. And then you can kind of match that clipped area up with the layers themselves, which you're able to view. So we basically import all of those layers that we're using for the assessment into this front end of the database, so you're able to view it. And then that gives you an idea of what the constraints are on the site and whether you what sort of design approaches you might want to take to kind of make the site deliverable. And also, just to quickly touch upon just this appraisal tab a little bit more. So this is a non-cash flow viability model, but basically what we do, we take kind of as you would do normally with a site assessment within a SHLA or a different assessment. You take all of the values which we sort of get from context sales prices. So we look at what the sales prices are for the type of development that we're proposing in the area, get the sales values from that. So again, according to the capacity analysis that we've already undertaken based on the area. Then again, sort of get the values for commercial uses or industrial uses that are on site. And then what you're able to do is kind of work through this form and understand how we've got to the viability position that we get to. So all of your build costs that are based on the BCIS, so they're all independent for Hounslow, but also for the type of development that's available or applicable on the site. Again, so you sort of run through all of your costs, all of your additional costs, externals, additional development costs, which we've based on some industry assumptions, but what we've built into the database is the ability to change those assumptions. So, for example, if going forwards, if next year or the year after or whatever, you decide that the contingencies should actually be 6% of build costs or less, then you can change that, and then every site that you then add to the system or then gets reassessed as part of our sort of updating program, then uses that new value. But what we've also got the ability to do, because obviously there are some things when you're doing scheme viability that aren't sort of uniform across sites or across boroughs or anything. So what we've got is this ability to add custom costs. So section 106, for example, which might vary significantly across sites or across developments, you're able to add sort of your own value to that. And then that gets added on to the scheme costs and then is accounted for within the viability position at the end. And it's the same with abnormal costs. So obviously abnormals by definition are abnormal for the sites. So you might have a need to build, I don't know, a bridge or something, some specific infrastructure for the site, and you're able to add those costs, and then that gets accounted for within the algorithm. And obviously at the end, we sort of compare the scheme value and the scheme costs to the benchmark land values. And then you end up with, as Louisa said, the scheme viability position at the end, which you're able to sort of use in discussions about the site going forwards. I mean, yeah, there's sort of lots and lots of functionality within the app that we haven't really got time to go into at the moment, but I'm sure if you all are interested, we will do it at some other point. What I will also just show you is this table view as well. So we recognise that not everyone is sort of interested in the map view wants to scroll through all the map and wants to look at them all in that way. So what we've got is this ability to just view the sites in a table view. So according to the search that you create, all the sites come up here. You're able to view some of the key information, also go through to the site details, but you can also export that list to Excel or anything if you want to sort of use that for future reference going forwards. So yeah, I'll sort of stop there, Dan, in terms of the additional features, but there are plenty more.
Cool. Thank you very much, Josh.
No
So
worries.
yeah, obviously there is quite a lot of functionality built in, and we're very happy to set up a separate session to go into a bit more detail on each of the key functions. But hopefully what's become apparent is that taking this different kind of approach, and by making different assumptions, which were co-developed and co-created with the officers, we were able to understand the political context, the ambition of growth, and where certain sites were going to be more or less suitable around the borough. And we were able to apply that rule-based methodology to assign and score, rank, and weight all of the sites that exist around the borough. So the RLV stuff, the residual land valuation model, that's highly novel in the way that traditionally all of that information might come from an Excel spreadsheet. And by basically injecting all of this information automatically based on our own data on things like sales values or build costs, and the specific knowledge of the constraints based on the geospatial data in the background, we're able to get a really good idea of a high level of whether a scheme is viable or not. And this is obviously a vital part of that viability, the SHLAR assessment in terms of working out achievability as well as availability and suitability. So yeah, in terms of the speed, what we're expecting just in terms of the setup time. So we basically built this from scratch with Hounslow, so it was a bit of a longer process. As Joe mentioned earlier, we've been really successful and we've been really pleased to be awarded a contract to continue this work with the Birmingham City Council. We've got some Birmingham colleagues on the line, so hello to you. We're expecting to slim down the time that it actually takes to run this project from start to finish to 3 months in the Birmingham example. And hopefully that will get quicker and quicker over time. And we're really keen to try and speed up that process. And it's not just the speed, though. It's not just the efficiency in terms of time. It's also the wideness of the scope. Traditionally, officers have only got the capacity in manual terms to look at, say, 500 sites. But now we're able to consider a massive volume of sites. Literally every square inch of the borough in one way or another is being considered for its development potential. Next slide, please, Josh. So one of the other key advantages of taking this approach is because we're taking a blanket objective approach, we're a lot fairer in terms of assessing sites. Obviously, planning is a very political subject, and what we're trying to do is to make it a bit more data driven. So we're taking all of the variables that we know about a site, whether it's its sustainability in terms of the location, is it got walking distance to bus stops and town centres, is there a lack of open space, all of those different factors we can kind of weigh up, and that means that we're getting a much more objective and fairer view of screening sites. Obviously, we're not going to remove politics from the system altogether, but at least we've got the data and the information for officers to present to kind of help members understand the trade-offs, if you like, of taking one decision or another. Next slide, please, Josh. And it's really important to say that, as we've already mentioned several times, the process has been designed with planners. Again, we're a group of planners by background. Obviously, we've become quite specialist in terms of using technology, but we are fundamentally planners that want to use planning to do well in the world. We're also working with the officers within the councils to understand what the local context is. So obviously appreciate different boroughs and different districts around the country will have different expectations or ambitions in terms of whether they're very much hungry for growth or not, and we're able to amend the rules and the system to factor in those different conditions around different places. Next slide, please, Josh. Go. We'll skip on over this. What we're going to do though is we're going to include a link to the slides, so you do have a copy, so you can take this away if you're interested and read some of this after this. The other what I will just touch on this bit very quickly. Being one of the big objectives within the Hounslow case study was enabling more officers to see the world from a single hymn sheet. Obviously, different departments naturally they get focused in their own objectives, and what that can mean is that there's less of a holistic view. So, for example, the assets team don't necessarily talk that much to the planners and the education team, and so the idea is that by pulling all of this information together, we should get better decision making, because people will understand, okay, if we're putting out a new housing scheme over there, that's going to have a knock-on effect on this service or that service, and so it should lead to better collaboration amongst colleagues. Next slide, please, Josh. Yeah, we've kind of touched on fairness and decision making. So just to maybe help everybody kind of understand that this is just the beginning of the PlaceMaker journey, if you like. At the moment, we're specializing in this site assessment methodology, but what we're really keen to do is to explore the other areas of planning that could potentially be digitized. So one of the key inputs of the potential development and the unit mixes and the affordable housing mixes that go into the algorithm, we believe that more of that work can be automated using a whole range of different data sets and statistics. And so we're really keen to explore over the next few months how different areas such as the SMAR or the community infrastructure levy and infrastructure provision and things like that, they can all begin to be more widely considered holistically. And the idea is that we can transition to this point where we get fully local plans that are fully digital, and that's very much, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the sentiments within the new planning white paper, and hopefully the emerging planning bill will reinforce this when it's released later this year, that we should be moving away from documents that go out of date the second you press print to something that is more real time, more interactive, and more forward thinking, where you can test alternative scenarios and lead to better outcomes for people and places. So just to end there, Joe, do you just want to mention this bit about the consultations what we're offering?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So if any of you out there want to understand, well, that's great, thanks very much, I can see how Hounslow are using this, but you don't understand necessarily how it might need to be tailored for your needs, please just reach out to us, and you have a no obligation consultation. And you know, if you want a half-hour call or a 2-hour workshop, we really don't mind. We'd be more than happy to chat with you to understand a bit more about your needs, and if the solution is currently meets your requirements, or what any additional requirements might be, because we're constantly evolving this solution. So we're very confident that we can accommodate, you know, all those reasonable needs that are within this world of real estate. So please do reach out to us. I think without further ado then, Dan, it's probably time to answer some questions, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So I'm going to just start from the top, if I may. So I know Marina asked, where did we get all the ownership data? I think we've basically touched on this, but I think if you could just reiterate, Dan, that it's land registry, but there's also obviously our own ability to bring planning policy data in. But to be honest, we're getting a lot of it from local authorities at present.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, to be honest, we're really lucky in the UK, obviously, having the land registry as an available data set. Unfortunately, it does come with an annual license fee, but obviously Urban Intelligence subscribes to the National Polygon Service in our own right, so we can share that information with you. So if you don't have your own existing license to the National Polygon Service, we can bring that data in as part of exercises. Obviously, in the Hounslow case, there were loads of examples of data that they did have, but we're able to work with whatever you've got. So we appreciate not everybody's in the same position on GIS, or they might not have the right officer skills in-house. We're able to work with whatever you've got, and we'll be able to develop a plan to get you up and running with digital planning either way.
Great, thank you. So Saskia asked, do you value accessibility to infrastructure, amenities, public transport in your quest to meet targets, or are you simply meeting your qualified housing target as defined by the London Plan? Louisa, I think if you could field that one. I know that we've obviously talked previously about how we can begin to bring this information in, but for what people are looking at right now, if you could answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. As I kind of mentioned before about this tool kind of giving you more about an idea about your kind of like future land supply, kind of unallocated sites, but also brownfield and windfall sites as well. So having a kind of better idea about what windfall sites are coming forward means that you can sort of effectively plan for infrastructure a little bit better through your infrastructure delivery plan. The kind of tool at the moment doesn't have that kind of fed into it, but it's definitely a tool to kind of make that decision making a little bit easier further down the line when you do your infrastructure delivery plan.
That's right. So we do have something called Site Score, which is a planning due diligence tool. Like basically click on a land title and it will give you all the policies that affect that site, and that's got UK coverage. And within that tool, there is the distance to all the key services. So it would not be very sort of challenging from a technical perspective to build that sort of sustainability score, shall we say, or call it 15-minute neighbourhood. It's really for the local authority to define how they want to score sustainability, and it really wouldn't be a stretch to geospatially, you know, score and measure the proximity to all those services as part of the decision-making process. So definitely something that could be incorporated in the future.
Just on, sorry, on that same point, Joe, one of a couple of things that we're considering in other projects. So one of the things, hopefully they won't mind me sharing, but in the Birmingham example, we're potentially exploring access to open space as one of the data sets that's considered for making the future planning allocations. So it's not just pure what can the site do, it's also, like I mentioned, it's about thinking more holistically about sites and the world that they sit within, and understanding the relationship between all sorts of things like transport connections, whether the schools have got places, whether people have got access to green space. All of those things should be considered as part of good planning, and we're really passionate about bringing that functionality in.
Thanks, Dan. So Brianne asked, is this compatible with all GIS? I think you might need to explain a bit more about how the solution is provided to Hounslow and Birmingham currently.
Oh, sorry, Janos, just to bring Janos in as well. So Janos is our chief data scientist. Do you want to talk maybe about do you want to take the GIS question?
Sure. Yeah, I assume they're asking the different data formats. If that's the case, then yes, we're able to essentially ingest any standard GIS format, so be it shape files, geo packages, tab files, you name it, we can probably work with it. So yeah, it's essentially we are compatible with all the different GIS products. So if you are using ArcGIS, if you're using QGIS, whatever you're exporting from those apps, we will be able to work with.
And I think just on the flip side, if you don't want to use the PlaceMaker interface, even the analysis can be exported in those same GIS formats, so you can integrate them with your own GIS systems.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. The next question was, is the site suitability publicly visible, or can that be hidden? Josh, did you demo the publicly visible web map?
So the public web map, you've got the freedom to choose whether or not the site's visible, and obviously until something is quite far down the line, it's probably best to keep things hidden. So the interface that Louisa showed you in the first instance is very much an internal tool, but you do have that opportunity at the end to publish it and show the world if you're so minded.
Yeah. Lindsay asked, does this link to the council's planning application data to show planning history pending applications? So
I can take this one if you like.
Yeah, thank you, Louisa.
So at the moment we have our database linked into the London Development Database from the GLA, and that's because Hounslow's kind of planning application data isn't in the right format, unfortunately, to put it into this database. We don't have the planning data isn't geospatially mapped. That's something that we would love to do in future, because it would, like I saw another person sort of comment in the chat, it's a much more user-friendly interface for people to kind of click on and view planning applications than others are. So yeah.
I think just on this point though, we are using data in London from the London Development Database, which is the GLA managed database. I think we are using it in the Hounslow example, and there are sites that we've managed to link to existing applications. But appreciate that a lot of councils might have their own polygon data or point data on planning applications, and so we can work with either, anything that's available.
Yeah, exactly. Zoe asked what the setup process was like and what's automated and what requires manual entry. So Dan, I know that you touched on this, that we're already speeding up massively in 2 commissions. We've managed to half the time it takes to do this, but do you want to touch a bit more on what the process is like and what we do and what sometimes local authorities do, because we can take on all of it if we need to ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously it depends on where you are in terms of your own data maturity journey, if you like. So if you've got all of your GIS files, they're all organized, ready to go, then the process is obviously a lot faster. But like I mentioned earlier, we can use our own GIS data sets from our own in-house library where it's necessary. Just to give you a rough idea of the distribution of the Birmingham project in terms of where time is spent. So the first few weeks that we basically get the project up and running, we do workshops with the officers to understand some of those things, like how we're going to score the methodology, what data sets they want to include, what kind of land, what the scope of the search is in terms of the analysis. And then where we are in the Birmingham project right now is we're actually just about to start running the analysis. And the idea is that we'll run multiple iterations, and each opportunity, the officers will get the ability to feed back to us what they think the results are showing. They might think it's all amazing, or they might think, oh my God, you're crazy. And so the idea by doing multiple iterations is that you can basically refine it to make it as useful and to sense check it, if you like, so you've got more accurate information. So in both the Hounslow and the Birmingham examples, what we're providing is a hosted solution at the end of it. So all of their data we're going to host for them, so they'll be able to just access all of this information via the web browser, just as Louisa just demonstrated. So you don't necessarily need a separate GIS package. Likewise, like I mentioned, we can export all of the GIS elements to your GIS package. So if that's what you want, but that's to kind of give you an idea. It's probably a month to set up and between 1 to 2 months to actually run the analysis, depending on what else we've got on at the time.
Great, thanks. I think we've already touched on Alex's question around linking up to the planning portal, but yeah, the data, once it's consumable and it's clean, is absolutely something we'd love to show in there for the benefit of the internal users, absolutely, at the local authority level. But obviously publishing it to be external as well is, entirely the council's decision. Anthony Taylor asked, is it possible to break the 106 cost down into different infrastructure requirements in addition to showing the overall costs? Perhaps a function of adding rows within the section 106 field. So I'll take this one as the viability expert. So absolutely, Anthony, we could, where the section 106 is well documented in local authorities, and there's a simple rate, for example, like a rate per metre of open space or hectare of open space. Anything that's a basic calculation can be automatically calculated, not a problem. I would love to say in the future that that'll be automated, but the very nature of Section 106 is it's supposed to be there for the odd packages, the things that don't fall into SIL. You may have seen that we're already calculating SIL on the fly, basically. So we're netting off any existing floor area that gives a credit, and we're adding the SIL based on the net additional gross resi area. So yeah, I mean, focusing on the AVM, the automated viability model, and making that much more detailed is something that we'll be doing in the future.
Sorry. Oh,
carry on, Dan. Sorry.
I was going to ask Louisa what the feedback had been like internally, and how maybe it's changed. Well, what's different? What's changed since the project started, Louisa?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of database has been really well received by everyone in the council. Our directors were super happy with it, and we've kind of shared it with other departments as well who have kind of looked over it and you know, kind of see different uses for it, like to find school sites or kind of the housing department to look at it for kind of regeneration and infill. And in terms of the viability, we used for the existing model, we used the land values from the MHCLG data, and it was kind of not making things viable, which doesn't reflect the real kind of situation in Hounslow, where you kind of have to have viability first. So we kind of took that to our internal teams and kind of asked for feedback, and we asked the GLA as well, and we've kind of revised the model to be in line with the London plan. So we're kind of, you know, we're very open to criticism on all the kind of different aspects to try and get it as good as possible. And we presented it to MHCLG yesterday as well, and it was really well received, with lots of attendance from different sort of departments within MHCLG thinking about kind of how it could be useful for their different commissions.
Great, thank you, Louisa. So Alex asked, is site contamination integrated into the data that the model considers? The short answer, Alex, is it's currently not, but we are, you know, I think the British Geological Survey have got effectively, they've managed to estimate the remediation costs of certain type of ground strata. And if they had that available as an API and the local authority wanted to include that within their financial modelling or the appraisal, then we absolutely could do. I think at the moment, because the viability is at a plan level testing, you are sort of permitted to be a bit higher level unless you are absolutely aware of the contamination. And at that point, you know, you probably have to make a bit of an effort to go and estimate the cost of that remediation. So short answer is we don't currently, but the moment there's some data out there that we can make machine readable, or other people have made machine readable, we can absolutely have regard to that within the algorithm.
Sorry, Joe, I'm just conscious of time. So thank you very much, everyone, for your questions so far. I'm sorry if we haven't yet been able to get to them, but we were trying to keep this as a bit of a quick fire session that we'd be able to finish on time. So if you do have any other questions, obviously, as we mentioned, there's tons of details that we'd love to talk to you about. So feel free to get in touch with us. Another event with the other project partners that Louisa mentioned earlier, so the GLA and View City, probably a bit later in the summer, so I think just after the holidays. So keep an eye out for that one. But otherwise, thank you very much, everyone on the Urban Intelligence team, for coming and for participating. Thank you very much for Louisa for giving up her time. And it's really amazing that it's always even more amazing to watch the users or the officers actually using the tools that we're building. So you get a really good idea from the user perspective what kind of value it's bringing, and it's really amazing. Thank you finally for everybody else for coming. Like I mentioned, we have recorded the session and we're going to distribute the recording, so you feel free to rewatch if you're fascinated or you want to share with colleagues that couldn't make it. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you at one of our future events. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Have a good day.